Oh, hello. Welcome to Travel Trivia ASMR and another gentle jaunt around the world. And specifically today, it is a gentle jaunt around Morocco. And if this is your first time here, I'm so glad you made it. The idea here is that we'll explore some trivia questions along the lines of Trivial Pursuit categories, you might say. A bit of geography, entertainment, history, art and literature, science and nature, sport and leisure. Not necessarily all of them in the one video, but a nice little spread from those categories. I'll give you 10 questions. All of them today will be related to Morocco, and there'll be things that you might find out or even ask yourself while you're on your travels in that country. And once I've asked the questions, I will take a leisurely hour or two to answer them in a gentle ASMR style. Now, of course, channels like this only grow thanks to people like you, and so I'd like to thank you if you've already liked or subscribed or commented on a previous video. I am aware that the forefathers of the internet decreed that YouTube shall scatter videos around wherever it likes, and this sort of interferes with the ASMR experience, but I don't have any control or option to stop that at the moment. It is possible I may do in the future if the channel has grown enough, so that's where your help comes in. We will only grow if we do it together, so do please press subscribe if you haven't done so already, and press the like button for any videos that you have enjoyed. And best of all, for me, please leave a comment if you want to take part in the discussion, because the idea here is that I'm posing questions which invite conversation and possibly even a little disagreement in places. So if you think of something that I haven't said, or you notice something that I'm not exactly right about, then do please let the community know by leaving a comment. And of course, do share the message, spread the word, tell your friends, particularly if you think Travel Trivia ASMR will be up their street. And I don't just mean they are someone who likes ASMR, they might literally be up the street that I'm talking about, so perhaps they'll be interested from that point of view too. Well, let's have a look at today's questions. I'll go through the questions 1 to 10, and then we'll hear the answers. Question 1. Where in Morocco is the assembly of the dead? And this will come with a sort of caveat because it concerns the meaning of a place name, and some of those etymologies can certainly be open to interpretation, and that's certainly the case here. Question 2. What Arabic word for gardens is a type of accommodation and a capital city? This may be worth saying that I mention it in the context of Morocco because, of course, Arabic is the most spoken language in Morocco, but also this type of accommodation was arguably popularised in Morocco. Here's question 3. What Moroccan mountains share their name with a type of book? I ummed over the wording of that. I wanted to say the mountains took their name from the book or the other way round, and I couldn't get to the bottom of which way round it is. So I've just had to say share their name. But see if you can work that one out. Question 4. Why isn't Morocco's largest city the capital? We'll make our way through some of Morocco's most well-known cities today. I'm not going to be spending much time talking about the capital city though, as it happens, or the biggest city in the country. We'll mention them, we'll pass them by, but I won't go into great detail about visiting them. However, we can ask, why isn't Morocco's largest city the capital? Now here's question 5. What type of building is the tallest in Morocco? If you've watched a few of the videos on this channel, you'll perhaps already be aware I do like a tall building. And this is a great example of where, if I had asked this question on the occasion of my visit to Morocco, which is actually a while ago now, it was 2009, then the answer to this question would have been different from the answer that we can now give towards the end of 2025. Question 6. Where is the world's largest car-free urban area by population? And that's actually declared by the Guinness Book of Records, I think, which is why they've got very careful wording here. Careful selection of adjectives. Largest car-free urban area. See if you can work out where that is. Then question 7. Where is the oldest university in the world? And once again, careful wording in the sense that I've put inverted commas there around the oldest university in the world. I wonder if you can imagine why, as well as thinking of the answer. And to save you a little bit of time and trouble, yes, Morocco is one way to answer that question, but let's be more specific. Question 8. What do they do with cow urine and pigeon poo at the tanneries of Fez? I could have used slightly more vulgar ways to refer to these products. I thought urine and poo were relatively polite. Can you imagine why they use them there at the famous tanneries in Fez? Here's question 9. What percentage of Moroccans speak French? We do know that French is one of the official languages of Morocco, but how many people actually speak it? And question 10, just for a little bit of fun at the end. Which is Moroccan, the tagine or the tangerine? You are allowed to wonder to yourself if both or neither are possible answers. But if you want to, choose one and see if you're right. Now, if you would like to jump to any of the answers to those questions straight away or at any point, you can use the chapters to do so. I've put the timestamps in the video description so that you can jump around. And of course, if you do choose to stay with me, use this as a lovely listening experience, and maybe fall asleep halfway through, but then you need to come back to continue where you left off, or find an answer that you missed, then you can use the timestamps for that too. But without further ado, let us get on with question 1. And I should say, by the way, that I have displayed a little map of Morocco there, courtesy of mapchart.net, and I have marked the coast in blue and the land border in red. I've decided to put a dotted line here for reasons I will come to, and you can maybe anticipate already. Up here, barely visible at this scale, the coast is interrupted because there are 2 Spanish exclaves there, Ceuta and Melilla. I won't be talking about them necessarily, but they do exist to prevent Morocco from having a continuous coastline. And of course, the neighbours are Algeria here, Mauritania here, which doesn't actually border Morocco technically, but it's close by, and then Western Sahara, which I will mention again shortly. So then, where are we going for our first question? Where in Morocco is the assembly of the dead? Now, I have already mentioned that this is a question of etymology, of the meaning of words, the original meaning of words, and you hardly need it pointed out that when we're talking etymology, it is open to interpretation, and even modern translation of Arabic can differ. Modern translation of any language into another is to a degree flexible depending on context. So we'll have to take all of this with a slight pinch of salt and see which version you like the best. Now, I have just got my Google Maps up here, and I'm going to put the Arabic answer to this question and see if it will do the correct thing of finding it. There we go. Jama al-Fna is the answer to this question. And if you didn't know, that is that famous bustling square in the city of Marrakesh. Just click on some of these pictures from Google Maps as well, and I'm sure you have seen this sort of thing. These are not all Jama al-Fna, they're just some of them are just Marrakesh, but that's certainly Jama al-Fna as the sun is coming down. There's another one. There's a daytime one, and I think actually the first one was amongst the best, wasn't it? Although slightly blurred there. Maybe that one captures the atmosphere best of all. Well, I'll tell you what I can show you rather than just pictures and rather than just Google Maps, I found online this interactive map of Jamal el-Fna, and we can click on it and see various things. That's water cellars, okay. What else have we got? That's Gnawi rhythm instrument, so people playing music. Anything else around here? That's a storytellers, okay. And we have spicy tea vendors. I must say, Chilean dancing boys, Chilean dancing boys. Every time I look at this map, I seem to click on new things that I didn't see the previous time. Oh. And certainly it's my experience with interactive maps is that some of it's interactive and some of it isn't. Aqua restaurant, okay. And any other cultural life up here? Argan musicians. Well, we certainly have a snapshot of the sort of thing that's going on here in this square. Now, let's just write the name of the square here in my answer, and I'm just using one of the possible ways to transcribe the Arabic into English. I think because I put a double A there, I should put a double A there, but I have seen it spelt without the D at the beginning. I've seen it spelt with only one A here and one A here. There seems to be different ways to translate or transliterate the Arabic into English letters, and that might be because there's one way in modern standard Arabic and there's another way in the local version of Arabic. But what concerns me here is why has it been referred to as the assembly of the dead? It doesn't look very dead nowadays, does it? It looks anything but. It looks alive, and it has a sort of a reputation of being alive 24 hours a day. Well, I gather that Jema is the Arabic word or an Arabic word for mosque, and there's certainly more than one Arabic word for mosque. Jama could mean mosque, but it could also mean a gathering of people or an assembly. Hence the question, where is the assembly of the dead? Now, as for Fna, that could be translated as death, I understand, or it could be translated as open space. So, if you do speak Arabic and you can explain, well, how can these words have such differing translations, then I'd be absolutely thrilled to hear from you. But some of it does seem to make sense to me. The fact that mosque could also be translated as assembly, the building being the mosque, the assembly being the group of people that gather inside it. That seems to make sense to me. In fact, in English we can use church in that way. The church can be the building, or it can be the the idea of activity within. The Church of England refers to an organisation, not a building. So I kind of see why mosque and assembly may come from the same word. And as for this word fna, does it mean death or the dead, or does it mean an open space? Well, that isn't entirely far-fetched either, because of course, famously in antiquity, they used to hang people out to die in open spaces outside a city. So I can see a sort of connection there for both possible ways to translate this. If you have a different way to translate that, then do please leave a comment. And I'm also going to put here that is in Marrakesh. Marrakesh itself is interesting when it comes to origins of names. I'm just going to push that down the road for a few moments because it's relevant to another question shortly, but for the time being, the answer to that question, where is the Assembly of the Dead? Well, it is one of the ways to translate Jama el-Fna. Now, I was really pleased to discover when I was both in town all those years ago, but also researching the answers for this video. Well, of course, things like this are stamped by UNESCO, and in fact, it was the actual place which inspired a whole movement by UNESCO. So we have the idea of UNESCO World Heritage Sites being places which are, what do they say? They say it's universal value to all of humanity or something. Well, in, I think it was 2001, UNESCO started a new initiative called Masterpieces of the Oral and Intangible Heritage of Humanity, which is another way to say that we're not just going to celebrate places, we're going to celebrate arts and culture and all of those things that humans do that are not just making a nice building. So things like the dancing and the musical instruments and the storytelling, and heaven knows what else is going on in this square. There were real concerns, I gather, that this square, where activity had happened for as long as anybody could remember, was being threatened by the risk of economic development. In other words, would they knock things down, build over the square, and so on? And so UNESCO actually took inspiration from this very place and said, this kind of stuff has got to be kept. And this became this project called Masterpieces of the Oral and Intangible Heritage of Humanity. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it's certainly well intentioned. Now, the last thing to do with that particular place is to mark it on my little map here, and I've got a map of Morocco to look at just off the screen there. Marrakesh, where do we put that? Well, it's just sort of east of that line there, and it's just south of that line there. So would that be about right? Yes, because it's also just south of that bulge in the coast, so I'm going to go for it. Marrakesh is where we find Jama el-Fna, the Assembly of the Dead. Now we're staying in Marrakesh in a way for question 2, although we could equally be going anywhere in Morocco, and I dare say many other places in the Maghreb and the Arabic-speaking world. Question 2 is, what Arabic word for gardens is a type of accommodation and also a capital city? Well, if we're talking about the meaning of capital city names, then surely my atlas of true names is going to come in handy, isn't it? This is a great little concept where instead of showing an atlas with the names of countries that we're accustomed to seeing, it actually translates the names into what they actually mean. So, can you find, we're not just looking at Africa here, in fact, we can see there's Morocco there, obviously. We want to go wider than that into all of not just North Africa but also other places of the Arabic world. There is a capital city whose name means gardens, as per the question. It's the capital of Saudi Arabia. And if the name of that city doesn't spring immediately to mind, well, maybe this will help. Here is a picture of the sort of accommodation you might find in Morocco. That gives quite a good indication. Actually, you can see there that is an inner courtyard. So clearly we're inside a building, a balcony is looking down on it, and there's a peaceful oasis inside the building, and there are rooms all around it. Now this isn't just an arbitrary choice, this is actually the accommodation that I stayed in Marrakesh. And his name is Riad al-Karama. Riad is the answer to our question. It means gardens. So Riad, R-I-A-D, is the word for the accommodation. The capital of Saudi Arabia is Riyadh, R-I-Y-A-D-H. I think that at any rate, one of the ways to spell this in Arabic is a sort of it's neither one nor the other. It's neither the conventional way of spelling the accommodation in English, neither is it the way to spell the capital of Saudi Arabia. But Riyadh does mean gardens, and I gather that's the plural in Arabic as well. The singular word for garden would be Rauda. So we've got the plural version, gardens. And I put this in the quiz in Morocco because, as I suggested earlier, I think Morocco is probably the place where this style of architecture became popular in the modern consensus. Of course, the Moors of North Africa did move over into Europe. In the 8th century they arrived in Spain. They were there for almost 800 years before they were invited to leave in 1492, along with a lot of other things that happened in Spain in 1492. And so you go around Andalusia, the southern region of Spain, which the Moors named Al-Andalus, and you see influences of Moorish architecture there. So I'm sure that you could find riad style architecture in Andalusia as well. But these days, what with the advent of cheaper travel and the ease with which people can go to Morocco on holiday these days, I think the average person became aware of the riad as a Moroccan thing, even if it is also something that you would find elsewhere. And that's going to go for certain other things that we'll see in future questions too. But that is our second answer. Now it's about time to move away from Marrakesh, but only slightly. Question 3 is, what Moroccan mountains share their name with a type of book? And you don't have to go far out of Marrakesh to find these mountains. Indeed, when you see tours advertised to the city of Marrakesh, they will typically say that it is in the foothills of the something mountains. Well, let's have a look at them in this book, which is incredibly heavy. And slightly unwieldy, but we can just see. Obviously this is a map of elevation, and so you have the differing colours showing the different altitudes, and here clearly we have very high mountains, and you can just see that that mountain range is called it's called the same as the book is called. I took the dust jacket off earlier because it makes the book slightly easier to handle, but that does give us the added bonus. I can just bring it in here and show it to you. Yes, we are looking at a great world atlas, and atlas is the answer to our question. The Atlas Mountains. Now, there's a number of interesting things to say about this map and about the Atlas Mountains. First of all, I do note that the cartographers here have decided to include regions of this land here as Moroccan administered provinces. Now that differs from many international maps that you see, including my one, which we've got as the base to work with throughout the video. Many international maps would have the border along here and treat all of this separately. So this is a disputed territory. I suppose if you bought a map in Morocco, you would expect to see this counted as part of Morocco. I'm not quite sure why the authors of this atlas decided to do it, but it is certainly one interpretation that you see. I have not visited this area, so I'm not going to talk about it. What is interesting to think about is, why are the mountains and the book both called Atlas? Well, I think it's fairly well known that Atlas was a figure from Greek mythology, and he was condemned to hold up the heavens on his shoulders, wasn't he, for all eternity. And so, according to the Greek mythology, Atlas stood at the point of the earth where the sun set, in other words, the west. And so, therefore, you can sort of appreciate from the point of view of ancient Greece, which is further northeast than this map, then this area of northern Africa is the extreme west of the known world. And therefore, it's easy to assume, well, the name Atlas was given to those mountains because they're the thing that you can see in the west. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And there are other references to west in place names around here, because the very word Morocco could refer to west. I understand that the Arabic word for that country is Al-Maghrib, which in English we use to mean not just Morocco, but all of the Arabic speaking section of North Africa is the Maghreb. And in Arabic, Maghreb is the place where the sun sets, namely the west. So there's another reference to west. Is it a coincidence that this ocean is the Atlantic? Is that connected with the word Atlas as well? I don't know. The trouble with asking these questions and answering them is it throws up more questions to ask. I tried checking in an etymology dictionary, which of course is the very Bible of this sort of question, and I see that they have isolated a date for the word Atlas used as a book with maps in it, and that, I think that was first used in the year 1585. As for when it was first used to refer to these mountains, well, if it derives from Greek architecture, not Greek architecture, I'm sorry, if it derives from Greek mythology, you'd expect it to be far, far earlier than 1585, wouldn't you? And there was no definitive date in the etymology dictionary that I looked at, so I assume that might be right. However, having said all of that, there is a second thing of note in this discussion, which is the meaning of Morocco itself. Again, according to etymology sources, the country name Morocco derives from the city name, which we now call Marrakesh. And this in, I think it must have been a Berber language, came from Amarun Akush. Amarun Akush. You can see how Amarun Akush turns into Marrakesh and then Morocco. Amarun Akush literally means the land of God. So that doesn't necessarily have a connotation of West. However, I swear that when I was in Morocco, I was told that the English spelling Morocco, let's just go back to the front page where we see it. Divide Morocco into two. It seems to be, you know, is that connected to the word Moors? And Oko, is it a coincidence that the word Occidental, meaning West, starts with OCC? How has that arrived at OCCO in English? Am I just barking up the wrong tree? I'm absolutely convinced that I was told when I was in Morocco, this means most Western. So, this is where your comments come in. If you know one way or the other that any of the above is right or wrong, then do please chip in. I look forward to you taking part in the conversation because, as I have said already, your interaction is what makes the channel thrive. Anyway, the short answer to the question is that the mountains and the book are both called Atlas. And so we continue, and it's no coincidence that we started in Marrakesh and we're going to be basically heading north towards the end of the video because that represents the journey that I did. There's a song called Marrakesh Express written by Graham Nash, and of course that is about his own journey catching a train in Morocco, and that's exactly what I did. Morocco does have excellent railways, and so I flew into Marrakesh from actually from the Canary Islands. I'd been in the Canary Islands, which were only over here, and flew to Marrakesh. Then I took trains up through towards the region of Casablanca and Rabat, and then so on. I just used the French pronunciation Rabat. Maybe I should say Rabat in the English way to avoid confusion. And that does bring us to question 4. Why isn't Morocco's largest city the capital? Well, just before I answer that, let's have a look at another trusty favourite from this channel, which is my grandfather's school and college atlas. And every time I look at this, I change my mind about when it must have been published, because there are maps which make me think 1920s. I've seen maps which have made me think earlier. Now I'm inclined to think is it even earlier than that, because look at this map of Africa. It is clearly a colonial era map. All of this territory here is under the control of France, including what is some of modern day Morocco. But look there, where Morocco appears to have been sectioned off into its own thing, and it's coloured differently. And I can only assume that that is what it looked like before the French took control, as it certainly wouldn't be after it. Wouldn't be post-independence Morocco, which was the 1950s. The French came along in, I think, the first decade of the 20th century, and so prior to that, I think there was a region under Spanish control, and so that could be what we're looking at there. And notice also that the word Morocco twice is there twice. Once as country name and once as city name. So that seems to confirm what the etymology was telling us, that the city of Marrakesh gave its name to the country of Morocco. That's the first time I've actually seen the city named as Morocco. So, in reference to our question, why isn't the largest city of Morocco the capital? Well, what we can see on this map is that the current capital is here, but the largest city is not. So, let us have a look at what the largest city is. You must remember this. Of course, when we want lists of large cities, Wikipedia is the place to go. And so here's our list of cities in Morocco, and we see the largest city is Casablanca. When the French arrived in the early years of the 20th century, I understand that Casablanca had a population of 12,000. Well, the century goes on, and as time goes by, the population grows to more than 3 million, which is what makes it the largest city now. You'll be pleased to know I don't have any more Casablanca jokes. So why isn't it the capital? Well, the most obvious thing, as we saw from that map, is that the place that's now called Casablanca hardly existed when the French came along and decided to establish a city of their own control. There are 4 imperial cities of Morocco, and we see them on this list. Fez is one of them. Marrakesh is another. This is to say, capital cities of dynasties that at one time controlled Morocco, like the Almohad dynasty. I remember learning that from Spanish history. And then we also have Rabat, which was an imperial city. I think the other one was Meknes. Now, pardon me if I've got that wrong, but I think that's the 4 imperial cities of Morocco. And prior to the French arriving, Fez was the capital of the place that the French were about to take over or seize control of, depending on your interpretation of colonial affairs. Well, the French didn't want to rule their protectorate from Fez. They wanted to stamp their own mark, and I think it partly came down to the personal preference of the governor in charge, and he chose Rabat this would be an opportune time to put Rabat on our map, because one reason he chose Rabat, apart from it being an imperial city, is that it was a coastal location, but one that had space for development. So it's somewhere on the coast. It is it's not due north of Marrakesh. It's somewhere north and east. And actually, what we could do to start with is let's put Casablanca on, because Casablanca is almost due north of Marrakesh. So Casablanca would be there. Rabat is not very far away, but it's far enough to be a measurably different place. I think it's somewhere there, sort of in that kink of the coast. And so the French decided to put their centre of administration there because it had been an imperial city, but it was also a space where they could assert their own regime. And it wasn't Fez, which we'll be visiting later, and it wasn't Marrakesh, those being two very prominent rivals, if you like, and it's not an uncommon story where capitals are created in a sort of a neutral place, such that the two main rivals are equally appeased or equally annoyed, both of which could be true. And Rabat was chosen as the French centre of administration, and then when Morocco became independent, they retained it as the capital city. So we could say that actually these days Morocco in a way has four capitals. Rabat is the administrative capital. Casablanca has grown to be the largest city, so it's the economic capital. Marrakesh and Fez have been called the cultural capital and the spiritual capital, so you could look at it that way. Now, how can we answer all of that in a short sentence or short one-word answer? Why isn't Morocco's largest city the capital? I'm going to say it hardly existed when the capital was chosen. And that is a slightly pejorative way to put it, for which I apologise, but what I mean by that is it was very, very, very small. Nobody turns up at a village of 12,000 people and says, let's make this the capital city, shall we? So Rabat is the capital instead. Now we're actually staying in the region of Rabat for the next question, question 5. And that was, what type of building is the tallest in Morocco? And for that, I would just like to find the trusty flags of the world and equip ourselves with the flag of Morocco, because it has an important bit of symbolism. Any decent flag tells you something important about the country, and Morocco is a great example of that. Oh, there you go. That was an easy job. A red flag with the green star of Solomon in the middle. And that is a common Islamic image. It conveys the idea that Morocco is an Islamic country. And by the way, that's why I chose green for this map, is because of the reference to Islam. And also, it's a slightly Moroccan colour for me because it makes me think of mint tea. So, what's the tallest building in Morocco? I could have asked that for question 5. I could have just said, what's the tallest building? But of course, expecting most people to know the name of the building is a bit too much. So what type of building is a question that will do. When I was in Morocco in the year 2009, it would have been a different answer, and it would have been directly relevant to the fact that I've shown you this flag. Now, I wanted the answer to be a building that I'd seen, because I'm not going to lie, I have been on several trips that were specifically designed around, let's go and see one of the tallest buildings in the world. This wasn't such a trip, but when I was in Marrakesh, I noted that the Koutoubia Mosque has a very, very tall minaret and is the tallest building in town. We did actually briefly see it in the pictures of Morocco that we saw at the beginning when we were flicking through for pictures of Jama el-Fna. I'm sure that one of the pictures we saw showed the Koutoubia Mosque. Well, that's not the building that was the tallest in Morocco on my visit, not by a long shot, because it is a mere 77 metres tall, that minaret. And there is another one in Casablanca, the Hassan II Mosque, whose minaret is far higher. And just as Wikipedia is the place to go for lists of cities, well, lists of tall buildings is hot on the heels of the list of cities in terms of reasons to use Wikipedia. There's the mosque in question, the Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca, the minaret 210 metres tall. And when I visited in 2009, it was Morocco's tallest building. It was also the world's tallest minaret. Although now that's not true either. It's been overtaken in that regard by a minaret in neighbouring Algiers. I don't know if that's a bone of contention or not. But you notice that this is number 2. It's pleasing. Pleasing that that's still number 2 on the list. So what is number 1 on this list of Morocco's tallest buildings? Well, before I do that, is the Koutoubia Mosque here? The one in Marrakesh? Ooh. I should have checked this earlier because my eyesight is not really good enough to see it jumping out at us. Oh yes, buildings less than 100 metres. That's fine then, because I said earlier that it was 77. Oh, that's 78 metres. Oh, you're kidding. I if you actually stopped the list just before you got to the Kutubia Mosque. You actually saw me coming, didn't you? Oh well, never mind. Let's go back up right to the top, back to where we were. Building number 2 on the list, the Hassan Mosque of Casablanca. What is number 1? It is the Mohammed VI Tower. Interesting, no picture on this list yet. I think any of us have the right to update Wikipedia, so if you're watching this and wish to, go ahead. It's in the city of Saleh. Now I went there, in fact. I know exactly where that is. And on this map it's going to be incredibly hard to distinguish it from Rabat because it's right next door. They're literally on opposing sides of a river. Well, when I was there, that building did not exist because they have only just finished it at the time of my recording this. It is 250 metres tall and it was completed in 2025. So we can't see a picture of it there, but it is going to tell us what it is. It is the tallest building of Morocco. It is the headquarters of the Bank of Africa. Right. Okay. So it isn't a mosque. Ah, there you go. There's a link to it. Are you going to show us a picture? Oh, there you are. Oh, strange picture to choose for the page. I suppose it's curious to see it with the. I assume that's the Medina wall of Saleh. I can't remember if they call it a Medina or a Kasbah. Medina means a walled city, and a Kasbah means the fortified part of an old city. So that's obviously one of the two of those, plus the new Mohammed VI Tower in the background. So let's put the answer to our question. What type of building is the tallest in Morocco? It is a skyscraper. And it's the headquarters of a bank. I think there's other uses for it as well. Hotel rooms, retail and so on. But at its heart it's the headquarters of a bank. I don't know if you can tell from the tone of my voice, but I don't mind saying I'm a little bit disappointed. I think there's just something lovely about religious buildings being the tallest ones in town. See if I can go back to that list there. And yes, there are. I mean, this isn't unusual. It's certainly not intended as a criticism of Morocco by any means, because it's the same everywhere. The modern skyscraper is the dominant force on city skylines around the world. So it's unusual to see cities where the tallest building is an old religious one. But you do find them from time to time. And at least when I went to Morocco, that was the tallest building around, a mosque. So, we're halfway through. On we go to question 6. And as I suggested earlier, we are going to continue up to the north. In fact, from Rabat we kind of go east and then continue to the north. And question 6 asked, where is the world's largest car-free urban area by population? Well, I have got a tourist map which shows us the answer. I won't actually say the answer yet. I'll just leave you to see if you've got good enough eyesight to see, because I sure don't. Even if I pressed this piece of paper right up to my face, I still wouldn't be able to see it. It's tiny. But you can see here, this is clearly an old walled city. And inside it, the slightly darker orangey shade is for buildings and the lighter yellowish shade is for the streets. And but for one or two places where there's vehicle access for a little bit of loading and offloading and so on, it should be quite clear that this is no place to be taking a car. You physically can't do it. This is an area of 9,400 streets, and well, the record shows 156,000 people in an area of just over 2 square kilometres. This is according to the Guinness Book of Records, and in 2009 they made an entry for largest car-free urban area by population. So this is carefully worded, isn't it? It allows places like giant slums of India to exist, which certainly have a greater population and are larger, but maybe they do have a limited amount of vehicle access inside. Well, this has none. This is the largest car-free urban area in the world, and we are in the Medina of Fez el Bali. Fez el Bali. I'll tell you what, just for this question, I will use the Moroccan spelling that I've seen, Fez with an S. The English convention is to spell that with a Z. But Fez el Bali refers to the Medina, the walled city, whereas Fez can include other areas around it. Now, here's a little tidbit from either this is the Guinness Book of Records or it's UNESCO. I think this is the Guinness Book of Records saying this. It said, often hailed as the closest one can come to feeling like being in that Cairo market scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. The narrow design of the ancient streets of Fez al Bali, some no more than 2 feet wide, make it impossible for cars to get through. Now, in my experience, this doesn't prevent motorcyclists where there are plenty, and also animals carrying things. I certainly remember some donkeys, cyclists, and also just people carrying enormous things like refrigerators on their backs. All the while, people are selling their wares on either side of the narrow alleyway, and so there's barely any room to get through. And of course, it is by turns absolutely magical and absolutely exasperating. just when you think you're getting used to it, something else happens to kind of bring you up short. And bless them, and they have every right to do it. The people who live and work there, they are there to sell you things. You are their potential customer, and so they're going to try to attract your attention. And you can either get frustrated by it, or you can try to engage them in friendly conversation, which I did. I was keen to try to speak French with people, which had limited success for reasons that I'll mention later, because there's a question about it. But it's like nowhere else. It's just an assault on the senses, and it is wonderful and weird. And of course, what they say is this is what life has been like in this place for thousands of years, give or take the odd motorcycle. And yeah, you peer through narrow doorways, and you see people knocking bronze plaques into shape to make bowls or something like that. Clay pottery is going on. Meat is being grilled somewhere all the time. And you see all sorts of things that you thought had been lost from the world for years. I remember rounding a corner and encountering a man selling cassette tapes, which even in 2009 seemed very, very out of date. I'd love to go back there now and see if I can find that bloke. I sound like I'm taking the mickey a little. I really am not. I have very fond memories of that place. It was hard work at times, as any new city can be, particularly a busy one, but I vividly remember Fez far more than anywhere else in Morocco and many other places in the world. And that is partly due to some of the other things that Fez has, which we're going to see in a future question. And it's not a very difficult leap of faith to have a stab in the dark at the answer to question 7, even if you don't already know. Where is the oldest university in the world? Well, obviously this is a gentle jaunt around Morocco, so the answer is going to be Morocco. And we've just been talking about a large and ancient car-free urban area, in other words, an old city. So, yep, sure enough, the answer to our question is going to be Fez. In fact, let's put Fez on the map, on our main map, before we go any further with the detail of exactly where that university is. Now, where's Fez? It's due east of Rabat and Casablanca. In fact, because I've been a total idiot, it's sort of where the T of Rabat need. I need to put it. I tell you what I'll have to do. In fact, this might be right anyway. I think it's just south of Rabat and north of Casablanca and east from them. So in other words, I could put my dot in between those two words, and I've just got room for it. There we go, there's Fez. So there are sources out there saying oldest university is in Bologna in Italy, but I'm sure that when I was in Fez, I was told here in the middle of the Medina we have the oldest one in the world, and the Guinness Book of Records has endorsed it as well actually. It says, the oldest continuously operating institution of higher learning in the world is the University of Al-Qarawiyya in Fez. And if oldest continuously operating institution of higher learning doesn't mean university, I don't know what is. Let's see if we can zoom in and find it here in the key. You see there at the bottom of the key, there's the Qarawiyya Mosque, and if we go to the middle of the map, it is Mosque 10 in the key, and it's right there. You see these coloured lines, they are tourist trails through the Medina, with the golden triangle there is linking several mosques, and so that's it. That is the mosque which was the origin of the university. And this might be the key to why the spoil sports that compiled the list I saw on Wikipedia are not counting this old university in Fez as the oldest in the world. Is it that it hasn't been continuously operating? Not sure about that, because I think it has been. I think it's more likely to be that this university, whose name, let's write it down, the University of Al-Qarawiyya. It started life in the year 859, which is about 200 or 300 years before the one in Bologna. 859, but in its early years, and indeed until the 20th century, I think it was what is called a madrasa, which is a religious school for the study of Islam. So yes, it was a university, but it was a university specialising in Islamic studies. And I suppose that might be the reason why some lists don't allow that this is the oldest university, because it wasn't classified as a university officially according to the European Convention of what universities should be until the 20th century. That European Convention is for universities to offer faculties of all sorts of things and not just one study of a specific topic. So I don't think it's relevant that it was the study of Islam in particular. It was just that it was a specialist place of study for one thing. So that's perhaps why you might see other sources that don't mention it, but hey, this is a video about Morocco, so I'm going with it. The University of Al-Qarawiyya in Fez is the oldest continuously operating institution of higher learning in the world. But that is not the end of Fez by any means, because the next question is probably the bit of Fez that everybody knows the best. What do they do with cow urine and pigeon poo at the tanneries of Fez? Now, I will show you a picture of them, just in case your memory needs refreshing. But first of all, let's locate them on the map. We were just here in the centre of Fez at the university, and you may just be able to see there is a little area there, the shaded darker brown area where it says Chuara Tanneries. And notice the shape, a sort of a long rectangle with a wider square area. It's got almost like a mallet shape. Well, I will also show you, if I can find it in the right place here, the iconic picture. And that iconic picture, there's plenty of them out there. I admit I didn't take this myself. This is a picture that has been put online by Uwe Brodrecht, and so I'm going to share that because Uwe Brodrecht has shared it with us. That is the iconic tannery of Fez. Now, of course, you've seen that before. You can't have made it into the 8th question of a travel trivia quiz if you're not the sort of person that's seen the tannery of Fez somewhere. You've probably seen it on television, maybe on a programme like The Amazing Race, or right across the world in the UK. Travel programmes, documentaries, plenty of people have featured this place, and there's that distinctive shape, the long rectangular section and a sort of a mallet head there. And I was a little surprised when I went there. Of course, you work your way through the narrow alleys of the Fez Medina, and everybody knows where you're trying to get to, so before you know it, you've got a companion who offers to accompany you there. And fair enough, they take you to exactly the right place, and they sit you on a balcony and you gaze out. Now, the bit that I'd seen on television was just the colourful bit, with all the coloured dyes here. And so I was quite taken aback when I also saw there was this massive area here. A non-coloured bit, you could say. And these are two parts of the same process, and the answer to our question about cow urine and pigeon poo is relevant to the less coloured section. Don't know if we see, it's difficult to see in that picture what these people are wearing. Oh yeah, you can just make out there that man there is wearing trousers, and he would also be wearing boots. Whereas over here in the coloured section, again, we can't see from that angle, but those people who are standing in the coloured sections are wearing, or they have bare feet, and possibly even bare legs. And there's a reason why those two groups dress differently, and it is because of what is in the water in order to treat the cowhides. Well, when they first come in, I understand they go into this whiter section, and those vats there are made of limestone, and the limestone is mixed with water, and at at that point they also mix in the cow urine and the pigeon poo and sulphur, I think. And the reason for that is that the ammonia in the decaying animal waste removes the hair from the cowhide and makes it soft. And because the ammonia from the urine and poo would also do very strange things to the human skin, that's why the people over here on this side are wearing protective trousers and boots. Meanwhile, over here, once the cows have been soaked in the ammonia here, soaked in the animal waste which has ammonia in it, they're removed from there and they're left to dry. Once dry, they can then go into the colouring stage, which is where they're introduced into these watery vats here, and those vats contain the dyeing agents, and those, unlike the ingredients over here, those are natural ingredients such as saffron for yellow and poppy for red, and what else do we have here? Indigo, I think, is used for blue. Not sure if that's an example of that. Can't see anything else that would obviously be indigo. Maybe that one over there, that looks indigo-ish, doesn't it? What else? Mint for green. That might be a greener one. And cedar wood, I gather, for brown. And if you want shades that are not exactly red, exactly brown, but somewhere in between the two, then of course you mix the natural dyes. And in that process, they have cleaned the cowhide, removed the hair, left it to dry, introduced the colour, and so they have turned it into the leather that is going to make your several £100 coat, or your luxury bag, or whatever else is your pride and joy, because it's made of leather rather. Let's just remember that in order to get to that, they had to dip it in cow urine and pigeon poo. While you let that sink in, let's write the answers to the question in a word or two. They use the urine and the poo to remove hair from the cowhide. I hope I have done justice to the centuries old and well honed technique of making leather goods, because it is perhaps the most iconic thing of all the things you can see in Morocco. So, on to question 9, for which we head up to the north coast, because that was my final train journey from Fez up to Tangier. And so let's put Tangier on the map here, and it's right up here in this corner. And I'll put the word there, out in the sea, which of course is where I should have put the words here, but never mind. question 9 is, what percentage of Moroccans speak French? Now, why come to this at the moment of arrival in Tangier? It's because I travelled through the land by train, and on alighting from each train I negotiated the cities on foot, found my way to where I was staying, and enlisted the help of passers-by, or more often than not they offered their services to me even before I asked for it, and that went for pedestrians and taxi drivers. And when I got off the train at Tangier, I remember coming out of the station there and being met by a gloriously shouting throng of taxi drivers, all of whom were determined to be the very person to help me out. And I had been trying to communicate in French at this point. I'm supposed to be able to speak French fairly well. I studied it at university along with Spanish. And so I had been hoping that in Morocco this would come in handy, that I'd be able to talk to people in one of their languages. But as the time went on, I became aware that there were lots and lots of people that I tried talking to who didn't understand me. Now, this may have been partly because of my faltering French, but more likely, I decided, they don't actually speak it. And this might be a European way of thinking of things, but French is an official language of Morocco by legacy of its history. And just because it is an official language doesn't necessarily mean that everybody uses it, not by any stretch. Let's just have a look at the false impression that European history sort of gives us. I'm going to use a map from this brilliant book called Brilliant Maps by Ian Wright. It is a book developed from the websites and social media accounts, and indeed YouTube channel of the same name. And they've got a map here which shows colonial Africa on the eve of World War I, which is to say 1914. Look how much of it is French. That bit which equates to Western Sahara is Spanish. And of course we have various other nationalities according to the key, but the point of interest here is the blue section, which is French. But just because it's under French control doesn't necessarily mean all those people speak French, and that I discovered was quite a fundamental lesson to learn before you go there. And so I looked up the actual numbers, and it's not actually a straightforward answer. We can say that French is still what they call a language of prestige, which is to say the language that is used in various official affairs like government matters and the law, I suppose, and certain levels of business, and I'm sure there is media available in French. If you have been to Morocco more recently than me, or indeed if you are Moroccan, then you'll share in the comments, I hope, to what extent do you tend to see or hear French every day? If you don't have a job where you're required to use it, would you expect to sort of see it and hear it around about you all the time? Well, according to, there's an organisation called Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, the International Organisation of Francophone places, or the idea of French being spoken. And they claim that 33% of people in Morocco speak French as a, quote, language of prestige. This is approximate. But this is only as a second language. There was a census in 2024, which is rather handy for the purposes of this video being made in the end of 2025. And according to that census, 99.2% of the literate population of Morocco can read or write Arabic. But that doesn't necessarily mean modern standard Arabic. It would mostly mean Morocco's own version of Arabic, which isn't necessarily interchangeable or even mutually understandable with modern standard Arabic. So you've got 99% speaking Arabic, and also according to this 2024 census, you've got 57.7% who can read or write French, but there was a very interesting footnote to the census data that I was looking at. That is 57.7% of the literate population, and of course that begs the uncomfortable question, well, what is the literate population? It is only about 75% of people, so in other words, 25% of Moroccans are not literate. So I hesitate to do the maths, but you know, 57.7% of a literate population, which is 75%, so that would be, what's 57.7% of 75%? It's something between 40 and 50% of people, isn't it? So that, you know, that begins to bring us closer to the claim of the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie that this quantity speaks it as a second language. I suppose the takeaway answer for me is not as many people speak French as I expected, not by a long shot. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to say that it is. The language of the colonial leaders should not necessarily be a lingua franca of today. And I do imagine that there's many calls for English to be used in official circles ahead of French. Arabic probably is and should be the preference, because almost everybody among the literate population speaks it. But if people are calling for English to replace French, then that would seem a logical thing in a 21st century environment. Now, in saying that, I realise that might upset some French speakers. I certainly don't want to relegate the importance of French in the world, I would just argue that perhaps as a former French colony, Morocco could and should have the right to walk away from it if they want to. There's one to discuss in the comments if you like. Whether you agree or not, I'd be absolutely delighted if you would take part in the discussion. Just a footnote on that matter of languages, by the way. The Berber people, who generally live in the mountains down in the south, they of course speak Berber languages, and that accounts for just 1.5% of literate Moroccans, so it's a fraction of the population that speaks Berber languages. Well, now let's finish with something which I hope is not as contentious as which language should people be expected to speak, but actually people get protective over their stuff. I don't know. Let's see what you think. Which of these things is Moroccan? The tagine or the tangerine? And I will admit straight away that one of them is and one of them isn't, according to the things that I've understood anyway. The question is, why am I mentioning them both in relation to Morocco? Well, let's see. Here I have, here's an article that I was reading, published by G Adventures of all people. It's an article called Origins of Food We Love, dealing with the Moroccan tagine. And this does remind me actually that once when I was in a restaurant here in England, I ordered, it wasn't a Moroccan tagine, it must have been a couscous, or might just have been called Moroccan stew. It certainly wasn't cooked in a tagine. And I said to them afterwards, when they came along and said, is everything okay with your meal? And I said, actually, I do have one complaint to make. On your menu, you've spelt Moroccan with one R and two C's. Just looking at it in that context has just reminded me of that. The way I remember how to spell Morocco is, as I mentioned earlier, I seem to have it in my head that it's Morocco, as in OCC, Occidental. But anyway, I'm not going into that again. So this blog shows us, well, there's an example of something cooked in a tagine, and then a few other pictures of tagines decorated very lovingly. So the tagine refers to the pot and the dish. So when we say a tagine, we are talking about the earthenware pot that it's made in and the stew that you make inside. And I do believe that it comes from an Arabic word, tagine, and we just mentioned the Berber people of the Atlas Mountains in reference to the language question. Well, it is they who apparently popularised this means of cooking, and it's first documented, the tagine is first documented in the Arabic chronicles called 1001 Nights, which is over 1,000 years ago. That's tales from around the Arabic world, and this is apparently something that people were using more than 1,000 years ago. And of course, you can make tagine with meat or fish, and with any vegetable or fruit that you care to add. Spices as well, such as saffron, cumin, cinnamon, the normal range of spices. The one that I particularly remember having in, I think it was in Rabat, was the a sweet and sour combination. So you had the really salty meat, such as lamb, and then lots of sweet things like prunes. Lamb and prune tagine, I'm certain that's what I had, and it was delicious. Now, why did the people of the mountains so embrace this way of cooking? And it is because you don't actually need much liquid in the pot in order for it to retain liquid within it. You imagine that you, for example, if you're cooking rice, you start with liquid, you start with water, you add the rice, well, before you know it, all the water's gone. This pot retains the liquid because of the cone-shaped lid of the pot. So you start with a little bit of liquid, you add the ingredients, you heat it, and the steam from the heat goes up into the open space of the pot, and it forms condensation and then travels back down into the mix and becomes part of the liquid that the food is cooking in. And so therefore, if you think, oh, well, Berber people, high mountains, they probably haven't got much of a water supply. Well, that's why I believe the tagine was developed in that area. Now, I'm sure you could find another Arabic source that said, actually, tagines come from another part of the Arabic-speaking world. Well, maybe so, but there are some who link it to the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. So the tagine definitely comes from Morocco. As for the tangerine, that comes from Southeast Asia. So why does it appear to have a name peculiarly similar to the port city of Tangier? Tangier. Well, of course, that is the point at which they were first imported into Europe, as late as the 19th century, by the way. Tangier, for many years, was an international city, it had its own status, and it was it actually had a reputation as a bit of a den of iniquity, because it was under self-control. But in reference to our question, it was a port, and it's where tangerines first came into Europe, and therefore they took on the name of that port. Now, the last thing I'd like to do before we close is add something which is perhaps missing from the map, and it is Europe. Tangier was where I finished my journey in Morocco, and I remember the night before I left, I found myself walking through a park on a slope overlooking the Straits of Gibraltar, and you could see Spain. It sort of goes up like that, and kind of around like that. It is perhaps a little further from Tangier, but at the narrowest point, the Straits of Gibraltar are about 8 miles. You can stand in Africa and clearly see that Europe is 8 miles away. And I just want to end on that note for those of you who are still with me to the end of this video, because one of the things that enables me to make videos about gentle jaunts around the world is that I have been lucky enough to visit other parts of the world. And I do remember standing in that park in Tangier and looking around me. There were dozens of people, mostly young men, standing in silence and gazing out at Europe in the distance. I was able to go down to the port the next morning and flash my British passport and take a boat out of there. And they were not. And this is one of the sobering sides of travelling around, isn't it? We feel at turns lucky to be there, and also lucky to leave, because not everyone can do that. So if you are watching this from Morocco, I would like to thank you for the hospitality and the fond memories. And I hope that by visiting your country I was able to contribute, even to a small degree, to your economy and to your livelihoods. Whether that was through buying a lamb and prune tagine in Rabat, or a leather wallet in Fez that had been lovingly dipped in cow urine and pigeon poo. It's definitely one of the places that has stuck most firmly in my mind, and this is a country that I went to more than 16 years ago. Now, if you have enjoyed this gentle jaunt around Morocco, I do hope that you'll press like and press subscribe so that you can be amongst the first to join me for another gentle jaunt somewhere else in the world. But for now, thank you for being here on Travel Trivia ASMR. Bye for now.